Well, they have arranged this so that the old man can sit for this session, but that may mean that some of you want to move because there are some of you I can't see, which means you can't see me, which may be why you're sitting where you're sitting. What is that, Jim? I do not need a booster seat. Jim, there are 2 other workshops. And as you've already detected, I don't have a real strong voice, so I hope you can hear me. Are we doing okay? I always think that's funny. The guy asks, "Can you hear me?" Well, if he couldn't hear me, then you wouldn't respond, of course. So, okay, well, I'll give this a try, and you let me know if there's a problem. This is a session, I suppose, designed for anybody in our age group, because we all know about grieving. My story is what is informing this workshop, but if I don't talk too long, maybe we'll have a chance for you to comment or to question, but I'll give it my best shot while we're here. Excuse me just a minute. About 20 years ago, I thought I was through speaking because I have a weak voice and it lets me down a lot. I just kind of marvel that I'm still talking. But what that means is you have to listen much more intently than in the old days when I could have yelled at you. Well, I've labeled this little workshop Some Thoughts for Us Survivors. And you'll catch on to why I'm calling us all survivors before I'm through, I think. You can't watch the news today, you can't look at social media without being discouraged. These are not encouraging days. But I'm not going to touch on much of that. I want to talk more about personal loss, the loss of loved ones. And this is not a phenomenon that is confined to old age. As a pastor, I've lost count of the number of people that I have walked with, prayed with, as they have tried to come to terms with the loss in their life of a loved one. And there's a kind of a paradox that goes with our old age. We have cause to rejoice and cause to regret all at the same time. And I've already said this, but I don't think I'm talking to anybody today who hasn't experienced loss, who doesn't have regrets. On the other hand, I don't know that we spend enough time, you and I, rejoicing in the fact that we're still here. When I was young, my goal in life, I so hoped that I would live to see the year 2000. I was not a healthy kid. I was asthmatic and I battled all kinds of allergies. And I honestly did not think I would live to see the year 2000. God has a sense of humor, and here I am still. But I'm both amazed and enormously grateful to still be here. Again, when I was younger, I had another cause to live long, I thought. My great-grandfather on my father's side died at 96. My grandfather on my father's side died at 80, and my father died at 73. And I thought, I've got to turn things around. So I did, and I've passed up both my father and my grandfather. My great-grandfather, I don't know how he must not have ever worked or done anything but just be alive, because he lasted so long and I didn't know him. But to still be here is pretty wonderful. I mentioned earlier that at our age, one of the sadnesses is the loss of our contemporaries, either through death or compromised health issues or some form of dementia. The point is, you cannot live as long as we've lived without living through a series of goodbyes And it seems that there's an accelerating speed of the goodbyes as we get. One of my favorite definitions of old age, not terribly spiritual. Life is like a roll of toilet paper. The older you get, the faster it goes. Well, that's where I am now. Well, I'm leading this workshop because of our own devastating personal loss. Our son was almost 27 when he took his life. And for Joy and me, life was divided into two with that act. The BLD years before Lane died and the ALD years after Lane died. It's the point of demarcation for us. And I suspect you probably have something similar in your own life, that you measure everything before that happened and everything after that happened. I mentioned in my talk that a few years ago I was speaking at this Senior Saints in the Smokies event at Johnson University in Tennessee. And I was in the middle of my talk. What they do there, they have 3 different groups that come in, 300 to 400 each time. And so I had to speak as the main speaker Tuesday night for 3 weeks in a row, and it was really a wonderful experience. But I watched the people come in, and it was kind of an epiphany for me, but it was an epiphany that happened right in the middle of my first talk. I was talking as an old man to old people, and I just stopped, and I just realized who I'm talking to. You're the survivors. You've survived about the worst that life can throw at you, and here you are. And I watched them come in, leaning on their cane, pushing their walker, being pushed in wheelchairs, white-haired or no hair, or a little bit of hair, carefully combed over. But these people were people whose lives had been filled with heartache and loss. They'd had to walk through the valley of the shadow of death. But they were there. They were there, as you are here, singing praises to God and truthfully having a good time being together. Now, not all old people I know are like you. Too many stories. I must pass on. I'm just thinking of all these old grumps I've had to deal with over the years, and some of those old grumps. You know that movie, The Grumpy Old Men? Well, some of them are women, and yet the old people I get to hang out with are not grumpy. Now, asked about how you are, you'll tell me, as you should. But you're here, deliberately praising God, deliberately seeking out one another, deliberately leaving home when you didn't feel all that good this morning. People of faith. So, if I were to put a little title to this talk, it would be What People Like Us, People Who Have Loved and Lost, Have Learned. And I'm going to share with you just 9 lessons that I learned through the loss of our son. And I hope that some of these will be helpful to you. If not, it didn't cost you a lot to come. So here's the first. Life goes on, even though at the time we didn't believe it could. Now, as a minister, I had walked, by the time we lost our son, I had walked with so many through their own tragedies. And I should have been more prepared than I was. What I wasn't prepared for, what I was so surprised by, was how exhausted I felt. Like I would never have any more strength. Again, my emotional strength was gone, but my physical strength was gone. And this one really worried me. my memory was gone. I couldn't remember things. And I wondered whether I would ever get my memory back again. It's similar to what I'm wondering now for a totally different reason. I have reached the age where memory is not all that reliable. But then it scared me. I had a couple of jobs that I needed to be able to think and to remember. And I just couldn't. I remember one event. I've got to be really careful here because I'll talk too long. Oh, did they not get those?
That you want them to have.
And thank you. Yes. This is my outline, which I'm providing for you because I don't believe you're going to remember. And I didn't remember to have them passed out. Oh, we belong together, you and I. This loss of strength, this exhaustion, about a week after I returned, at the time Lane died, I was preaching for the church in Arizona and president of the little university in California. And this story was from that campus. I returned to my office, and it must have only been about a week or two after I returned, and one of our employees came to my office to complain. And it was a legitimate complaint, I suppose, but I was in no mood to hear him. And after he got through, I confess to you, I wanted to lean across my desk and grab him by the tie and yank him toward me and say, "Do you know my son just died?" Now, to his credit, he knew what he had done, and immediately he left. And I was ashamed of my behavior. I didn't do that, by the way. I just said, I really don't have the emotional energy to deal with this today. He caught it, and it was okay. But it was an eye-opener to me to realize I had enough emotional and physical energy to push the papers, do the routine. I couldn't deal with crises. I had my hands full with my own. And so that was something I had to learn. Second thing, the pain eases after a while, though it never goes away completely. To this day, I can be talking as I was to you today, and something will remind me of my son, and all of a sudden I want to cry. The pain does not go away completely. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is you don't want it to. Deep down, you don't want it to. Not entirely. Because the pain comes because you remember, and you don't want to stop remembering your loved one. His laugh, her love of ice cream, the hugs, just the touch, or the locking of eyes across the room. You can fill in the blank. It does sometimes hurt to remember, but you don't ever want to forget. So you take the hurt. 3, your most comforting friends are those who had been there for you in the good times, before you were hit by the bad time, the loss. Now you can imagine, because I was pastoring a large church and that college, we had a wide circle of friends, and of course we've lived, as I already told you, all over the United States, so we have friends in lots of places. And many of them reached out to comfort us when they got the word that Lane had died, and we were grateful. But the ones who helped us the most were the ones with whom we already had a strong bond. They knew what to say. They knew when to be silent. They knew how to be present, but not pushy. They could read our emotional status and respond accordingly. Others who didn't have that closeness to us sometimes seemed pushy. They seemed to intrude themselves. they assumed a closeness that really wasn't there, hadn't been previously established. And when you're in the middle of your own loss and your own grief, that's not a time for you to devote to building a new friendship. You don't have the time, you don't have the energy, you don't have the attention span to do that. So these people meant well, but we turned for relief to our friends and loved ones of long standing. And this says something important, I think, for us survivors now. And it says something important for all people at all stages of life. But I guess we have to have lived a while before we fully get it. But you do want to keep your friendships in good repair. Now, because you don't know about tomorrow. You don't know, and again, most of you already know this, but many don't know that your whole life can turn on a dime with a phone call, one phone call. And it's never the same after that. So I've made a little, I've got a song Maria sitting in front of me. He and I have reconnected after decades. Song, I hope you know what that means to me. I have other friends who over the years I have not been good enough at staying in touch with. And I need to do that, honestly, not just for their sake, but for mine. So, that's the third point. Number 4, healing comes in different ways and at different places to different people. When our son died, at that point, Joe and I had been married 34 years. Yet we managed to surprise each other as we walked through that dark valley because we did not react and we did not adjust to our loss in the same way. Just one example. He died in Southern Oregon, and I mentioned in my talk the spot in the woods, in the forest that he loved, and that's where he went. And so when we were down there for his funeral service, we went to that spot, saw why he was there. It was beautiful, beautiful forested area, a favorite of his and of his friends. And in fact, when Lane turned up missing, his Tai Chi instructor knew right where to go to find him. Got there. I think the engine was still running, but it was too late. But he knew right that's what a favorite spot it was. Well, his friends in the area, they put a marker there, I think maybe even a bench. And Joy has, she wanted, after that visit, she wanted to go back. And I didn't. I still don't. She still does. We handle these things differently, and we've got to have the grace to grant the space to grieve in our own individual ways. She did such a thoughtful thing for me. Lane was into Tai Chi, and so from the things she left behind, she arranged a wall just by my desk at the university. Picture of him, I think the picture of him teaching Tai Chi to a child is in that book. And the original picture was on the wall, his sword, his sandals, lovely display. After a week, I had to take it down. It was too much. And what she did as a part of her grieving was wonderful, but for me, I couldn't take it. And so it had to come down. It was a constant... It's a constant reminder to me, even to this day, that I must be sensitive to people's individuality, not even expecting my dearest and nearest Joy to be like her husband in this thing that we shared at the deepest level. So, well, there's one more story I'll throw in here about this, because Again, in the book is a picture of the Haystack Rock at Port Orford, where we had a little family communion service at the rock, and then I gave his ashes to the wind and the wave at that place. And every time we're in southern Oregon, Joy wants to go both back to that place in the forest, and she wants to go to the Haystack Rock. And I will do it because I'm a really good husband. But it's not something I really want to do. It's just a difference. Number 5, the best medicine for a grieving heart is losing yourself in helping another. I had a conversation just on this trip out here about a dear young man whose life I'm worried about. He is totally into himself, and the whole world is against him, and we cannot get him out of himself to care about somebody else. It's going to kill him. So I want to repeat this. The best medicine for a grieving heart, even if you're grieving for yourself or you're grieving the loss of a loved one, the best medicine for a grieving heart is losing yourself in helping another. Now, I wrote that as if that was my own great idea. Jesus said something similar to that. If you would save your life, you must lose your life. There's no getting around it, period. It's not a sin to mourn. In fact, it's a necessity. But the downside of this good is its self-centeredness. There's no other way to say this than this. Grieving is more about me than about the one I lost. It's about what I'm feeling, how I'm hurting, how life has done me wrong. And as long as I concentrate on me, I will not heal. It's that simple. Now, these are, I want to underscore this. These are real feelings, and they have to be given time. Don't beat yourself up, and don't try to rush the process too much. But understand that they don't lead to recovery in themselves. Recovery comes when we finally can look beyond ourselves. I was so grateful that I had my jobs. I had to go back. I had to get to work. I had to solve problems. I had to deal with personnel issues. I had to care about people. That saved me. Okay, I'll start this again. Recovery comes when we look beyond ourselves to others who are hurting and reaching out and find ways to be useful. I was at the Spire Conference, which is the successor to the North American Convention in Nashville in September a few years ago. Gene Apple was there. Gene, a longtime minister of our huge Eastside Christian Church in East Anaheim, dear friend. Well, years ago, when I was preaching in Mesa, we hosted what we called the National Senior Adult Christian Convention. And it was fun. We had, well, by the time I retired, we had about 1,200 people who came from around the country for an event like this over several days. It was marvelous. Well, that one year, Gene Apple was the speaker. And I was the MC. I introduced him. And when he got up to speak, he opened his message by saying, Roy and I have a lot in common. Roy lost his son, and I lost my father. And that became the nature of our relationship from then on. We found a modicum of healing in helping one another through our losses. Well, that's how it works for everybody, really. For every one of us who has lost a loved one, there's somebody else who needs us. And our healing comes in helping one another. This book is kind of my last contribution, I suppose. It'll be my last book. And I've been really kind of amazed. It's opened up a new ministry for me. And it's been good for me. But every church, in fact, I'm speaking this coming, well, day after Sunday in Missouri, one of our large churches there. And the guy who's the minister had read my book and asked me to come. And I'm preaching Sunday on suicide. I've been now preaching in several churches on the subject. It's very personal for this man because he lost his father by suicide. And when he read my book, he said, I want you to come and talk to my people. So I'm enjoying doing that, but it's also acting out of this principle. I'm trying to help some other people by what has happened to me, and it's been healing. Number 6, blessed are those whose faith is for real, who learned to rely on the Lord before they were hit by life's toughest blow. Now, you all know conversion stories from people who did get hit hard and came to the Lord, but blessed are those, I think maybe more blessed are those of us who had the faith first, because that faith did ease us through the transition. Mostly we don't find faith in the darkness, but we hang on to the faith that we learned before the darkness came and threatened to overwhelm us. I've taken inspiration from the Apostle Paul, and the passage I'm going to read, you know, but it puts what I've been through in perspective, and I needed this passage. This is 2 Corinthians, beginning with chapter 11, verse 21. Paul is defending himself, as he often does in his letters. Here he says, whatever anyone else dares to boast about, I'm speaking as a fool, I also dare to boast about. Are they Hebrews? So am I. Are they Israelites? So am I. Are they Abraham's descendants? So am I. Are they servants of Christ? I'm out of my mind to talk like this. I am more. Now, what he's done there is he's established his credentials. He knows who he is in the faith, in the Lord. He's secure. He survived. Then he goes on, and this is what he survived. I've worked much harder, been in prison more frequently, been flogged more severely, been exposed to death again and again. 5 times I received from the Jews the 40 lashes minus 1. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was pelted with stones. 3 times I was shipwrecked. I spent a night and a day in the open sea. I've been constantly on the move. I've been in danger from rivers, danger from bandits, in danger from my fellow Jews, in danger from Gentiles, in danger in the city, in danger in the country, in danger at sea, and in danger from false believers. I have labored and toiled and have often gone without sleep. I have known hunger and thirst and have often gone without food. I have been cold and naked. Besides everything else, I face daily the pressure of my concern for all the churches. Who is weak and I do not feel weak? Who is led into sin and I do not inwardly burn? Okay, I read that. I lost my son. I have not had any of those other things that he lists. My life in ministry has been blessed. Joy and I, we've been all over the world. I'm from Tillamook, Cow County, Oregon. And I've been in 108 countries and all the continents and all the states. And then I read this. I have no right to complain about anything. And then I get with my peers, and all I have experienced, you have experienced, and many of you have experienced more. So, well, when I finally returned to the pulpit after Lane died, and that was an effort that required all I had to give, I pictured the people thinking to themselves, okay, this man is always talking to us about faith. Did it work for him? And the answer was, yeah, it did. It did. Thanks to the strength that comes from the Lord, I could walk through the valley of the shadow of death, and thanks to the fact that I had already been with the Lord, I could count on his presence to get me through the darkness. Yeah, it worked. 7. You are changed. You can no longer see things the way you used to see them. After a while, reviewing my life with our son and regretting our almost unbearable loss, I realized something else. And I would put it this way. I would give everything I have to get our son back. But I wouldn't want to be the person I was before I lost him. I learned so much, grew up so much, saw my whole value system altered. I was indeed a changed man. And I suspect you have something similar to that to say if you've lost a loved one. You grow deeper somehow. You grow less greedy for things. You grow much more appreciative of God's glory, of God's gifts. And for me, the top of the list of gifts is the friends God has given me. So I wouldn't want to be who I was before. Not that I have yet arrived. I don't mean to say that. I just mean I live with a deeper sense of gratitude. And I pay attention better than I used to. Joy would tell you if she were here, he doesn't pay attention at all. But the truth is, I pay attention better than I used to anyway. Number 8. Your relationship with your loved one has changed, but it hasn't been broken. When we were asked how many children we have, Joy always names, in addition to our many Velcro children, Kim, Candy, and Lane, who's now been gone 30 years, but only physically. I read this comment by a pediatric doctor many years ago, and I want to read it to you because I thought she was spot on. I've lost the citation. I don't know where I found it. Whatever holds a parent to a child isn't breakable. Parents sometimes say they're letting go of the child. But if you listen further, they're letting go of their pain, not their child. They say they still feel close to the child. They act as though they hear the child's voice inside their heads. The child sees through their eyes and acts through their actions. Now, the same is true of the loss of a spouse or a parent or a close friend. We let go of the pain, but not the person. My grandmother lived with my grandfather for 50 years before he died. And 6 years after he died, she said to me, "You never get over missing your man." And you don't, as I said, because you don't want to. Okay, number 9, this is the last one, and then maybe we'll have an opportunity for some questions or your comments. I've said this more than once, but I'm saying it again. You won't get over it because you don't want to. The lost one, our lost ones, they enriched our lives. They blessed us beyond measure. Of course we don't want to get over it. We have to move on, yes. But we don't have to get over it. When one of our dearest friends, this happened in Tennessee, a former student of mine, lost her husband when his heart stopped beating. I was teaching at the seminary there at the time, and I got the word and I called Joy, and we immediately went out to her house to see her. Other friends had already been given the word. They were there, but I had a minute alone with her in a back room. And she said 2 things that I've carried with me. She said, "I didn't know it would hurt this much." Nobody does. And then, with a sigh of resignation, she said, "Well, it is what it is. It is what it is. And I've got to tell you what, I think that's a great insight into our faith. Our faith enables us to look life in the eye without trembling. It enables us to say, this is reality. It is what it is. I have to deal with it. I can deal with it. God will give me strength. And so, we go on while we walk through the valley. I want to conclude with this scripture that I've turned to numbers of times beyond counting, because I'm talking to a bunch of Christians, I'm talking to a bunch of church members. You and I, we know everything that's wrong with the church. We've probably said so. And we can complain about the preacher and the sermon and the music and the temperature in the room, and on and on and on we can go. I just defy you to tell me an adequate substitute for the church, with all our warts. And I read this passage because in the course of my long ministry, it seems to me that what we really are in the church, we are the company of sufferers and comforters, and we hold those together. Here's the Apostle Paul on the subject. Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion, the Lord of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves have received from God. For just as the sufferings of Christ flow over into our lives, so also through Christ our comfort overflows. If we're distressed, it's for your comfort and salvation. If we're comforted, it is for your comfort, which produces in you patient endurance of the same sufferings we suffer. And our hope for you is firm, because we know that just as you share in our sufferings, so also you share in our comfort. So what is the church? A church is a safe place, a comforting place, because the people who are the church are, for the most part, people who have suffered and people who give comfort. All right. That's the end of my prepared stuff. And I'm sure there's some of you who would... I think I turned it off. I was oh, this is going to be a bit of a story. All of my ministry, for many, many years, I had a complaint that I took to the Lord periodically. Why, Lord, this is when I was preaching in Arizona, why, Lord, when you called me, did you call me to the desert and not to Hawaii? That's part of my story. The second is, when the new Lexus came out, long time ago, I began telling everybody who would listen, if I could drive the car I want to drive, it would be a Lexus. In 2018, I was the interim pastor of the Kaimuki Christian Church in Honolulu, Hawaii. And they provided, the deal was that they would provide housing and transportation for me. I didn't know what I was asking. Housing is expensive in Hawaii. So they provided the housing, and for a period of the time that I was there, they provided the car belonging to a woman who at the time was on the mainland, and I could drive her car, and it was a Lexus. So when you get discouraged in your prayer life, remember, I got to be a preacher in Honolulu, Hawaii, driving a Lexus. So there. All right. I was going to say something else now. I thought about that story. Now I can't remember what else it was I was going to say. This reminds me, by the way, of the good old days when we used to preach with a pendant mic. And I would spend half of the sermon getting myself untangled from the cord. Virginia, I know you've had all these years of taking care of Frank, and now she's sharing. Thank you. You couldn't stand it, could you? All right, well, then I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to grab my cane so that I can stand out. Would you like to just sit down and shut up?
Okay.
Thank you. There's a downside to having old friends. All right. Old? I've used it all day. Actually, I'm so proud to be old. But you're not there yet. Well, you're so much younger than I am. Yeah, there you go. Anybody want to make any comment or ask any questions?